Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the NCATC board for our webinar. While we have everybody entering the meeting, please take a moment and enjoy this video highlighting how Purdue University has adapted to the changing times.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Kathy Wrench of Quinsigamond Community College, based in Massachusetts, and the 2020 NCATC Board President. On behalf of the National Coalition of Advanced Technology Centers Board of Directors and our many industry strategic partners, I'd like to warmly welcome everyone to our webinar today. Next slide, please. NCATC focuses its work around 4 key pillars: the future of work in Industry 4.0, work-based learning, apprenticeships to entrepreneurship, competency-based education and industry credentials, and adult learning opportunities and learning equity. To a certain degree, today's presentation will touch on all 4 of these pillars, while focusing specifically on how we all may recruit students and faculty for a safe, high-quality return during the COVID-19 pandemic. We're so pleased to bring you the 3rd webinar in this series at no charge to members and non-members. However, NCATC members do receive several benefits, including a great network of other advanced technology centers to network and share best practices with. We'll be highlighting a couple of those partners today with South Central College in Minnesota and San Jacinto College in Houston, Texas. We also provide external grant evaluation plus technical assistance for National Science Foundation ATE grants and member assistance program consulting that can really help you align your college with industry in your area and ensure that you're on the right track to provide the educational opportunities to build your pipeline and workforce in your region. For more information, please send your information in the question box with your name, email, and college name. Now I'd like to introduce NCATC's Executive Director and CEO, Craig Ncatc, for some brief housekeeping comments.
With us today, and thank you for joining us as well across the country. Kimberly Johnson from South Central College will be here in a minute to kick off the webinar. Our keynote speaker is one of today's newest strategic partners, Mark Perna of TFS Results. He's an internationally recognized author, speaker, and CEO, and just recently kicked off the Perna Syndicate daily on Alexa. So look for that as you are out searching the internet for great daily tidbits on the workforce and education. After Mark's keynote, Sally K. James from San Jacinto College in Houston, Texas, will provide updates on technology and online classes used at her college. And we have Tony Neary, who started us off today from the Haas Morris Group, who's based in Cleveland, managing the question box for us. So please, any questions you want to ask the panel during our Q&A, queue those up in the question box and she'll make sure they get served up appropriately. And last but certainly not least, today's webinar is sponsored by NCATC's strategic partner for almost a decade, Zeiss. And Ali Ray, the academic program specialist, will be with us a little later to share timely and important information about their workforce and education initiatives for manufacturing careers and other things. And she and Alicia Anderson, who's an applications internal training and development manager there at Zeiss, will moderate our Q&A segments today with Tony. They'll have special information for all of today's attendees a little later in the webinar. Before we begin, I'd like to point out today's webinar is being recorded. We have our second actually ever NCATC virtual exhibit hall right after the webinar ends today at 3:30 sharp. It'll be an hour long and we'll give you a tray. You can advance the slides a couple ahead for us. The exhibit hall has 8 of our strategic partners. If you go to the next one, there they are. American Welding Society, EASE, Mastercam, Miller, the welding experts, Siemens, Space Tech, TFSS Results, and of course Zeiss will all be there. The way to get to them is absolutely easy. It's right on your chat box. You can click on that link at 3:30 after the webinar ends. Don't forget, you can go to NCATC website anytime for updates about what we're up to in all facets of what Kathy brought to you early on. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first presenter. Dr. Kimberly Johnson currently serves as Associate Vice President for Effective Teaching and Learning at South Central College in North Mikado, Fairport, Minnesota. Kim joined SCC in June of 2019. Before she was there, she was the Director of Faculty and Instruction Development for Minnesota State Colleges and University System. And she also served as a National Trainer and Resource Reviewer for the Office of Career and Technical Adult Education, a lot of us call that OCTE, at the U.S. Department of Education for nearly a decade. So without further ado, I'd like to bring up Kim Johnson. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Craig. We can go to the next slide. And just one minor correction. It's North Mankato and Faribault. Those are our cities in Minnesota where we have campuses for South Central College. Thank you for that introduction. I am the Associate VP for Effective Teaching and Learning. And part of my role is to direct our Center for Teaching and Learning Excellence. We go to the next slide. So we have just a few minutes today, but I'm going to briefly touch on these 3 things as we're thinking about the pandemic and our responses to it. The first is our survival mode and what happened at the start, our quick pivot to emergency remote teaching and what that looked like a little bit. Then I'll talk a little bit about how we are moving from that survival mode into a thriving mode with our increased focus on quality, accessibility, equity moving forward. And then very briefly talk about some of the lessons learned. There are many, many, many things we could talk about with lessons, but I want to highlight a couple that have really resonated for me in our work at the center. Okay, next slide. So surviving, everyone recalls what mid-March was like. We were just about to go on spring break when things really got heated here in Minnesota. We extended the spring break for a week to give people an opportunity to quickly pivot from face-to-face instruction into what I prefer to call and think about as emergency remote teaching. While it was moving into online, we were not in a position to focus on high quality, well-constructed online courses and online teaching and learning. We had to get students to the finish line. That was the focus, and do that safely. What that required, of course, was a real delicate need to balance the stress that everyone was feeling. The faculty, the administrators, the staff, the students, of course, with this need to do some quick pivot and quick movement. We had to respond to the unknowns like everyone else, and we had to get guidance from many different levels. South Central College is part of the Minnesota State Colleges and Universities system. It's our large public system in Minnesota, 30 two-year colleges, community and technical colleges, 7 state universities. So we had whatever guidance from the national level, guidance from the governor and the state level, guidance from the chancellor and the system leadership level, and guidance from our president and leadership level at the college, all looking to one another and looking at the science and trying to figure out what we can do and how we can do it quickly and safely. And of course, that goes back to bullet number 1, that just added to the stress. But our team at the Center for Teaching and Learning Excellence, like everyone else, it's kind of crazy to even think back to, we were meeting every day and trying remotely to try to identify the multiple ways that we could help and support the faculty in particular. So again, at the Center for Teaching and Learning Excellence, like every other office on campus, our focus is on supporting students. But at the center, we do that by supporting faculty and the focus on high quality teaching. So we had to figure out how we're going to help our faculty. When COVID hit in mid-March, less than maybe a quarter of our classes were available online. So we had a lot of face-to-face, of course, a lot of technology classes, hands-on. So we used D2L Brightspace as our learning management system. And we brought our expertise in academic technology and pedagogy and teaching adult learners, and created a SCC Keep Teaching course that we used as the place immediately that we could begin housing in critical resources for faculty. I mean, really critical, like the first 10 things to think about when you're making this switch, and how to use Zoom, and little videos on how to use Zoom, on what to do with D2L, where to get help, everything we put into this course. And all of us were organizing it and working on making sure the information was not overwhelming, but was as helpful as possible. We also tapped into the faculty we have who have been teaching online and have been doing it well. We have an online education committee, reached out to them right away, and many of them, immediately raised their hands and said, I would be happy to talk to colleagues. So we put that information out there and shared broadly with faculty that they have faculty colleagues who are there for any question. So those faculty online teaching mentors really were a critical part of this survival mode with emergency remote teaching. As I said, we're also part of a large state system, and the system office began to pull things together very quickly. They made those available to us, so we were not having to reinvent everything, but we were able to leverage the supports coming from the system office and from our sister institutions. And then at CTLE, our Center for Teaching and Learning Excellence, we used Zoom to offer daily remote drop-in times, which we continue to do. So Monday through Friday, There's an hour available every day that's just drop in for anyone who has any question about anything. And then in addition to that, we offered individual consultations with faculty on any topic. Okay, let's move to the next. So that was the very quick pivot to surviving. And I can talk more in the Q&A about some specifics of what that looked like with certain classes and how we helped to get students to the finish line. But when we got through April and into May, we got to commencement, we got most of our students, we got our students graduated, those who were ready to go. We also realized that it was a good time for us to take a step back and use our annual faculty development survey as a chance for us to take the temperature of how people were feeling to help guide our work for the summer and heading into fall. At this point, by May, our leadership was looking ahead and realizing that we probably won't be on campus full-time in the fall. So we're going to have to continue with remote teaching. So we sought to gather some data from our faculty about their experiences with that move to emergency remote teaching in the spring, how they felt about that and their confidence levels in teaching remotely, what kind of supports they needed to teach online successfully, what they had taken advantage of, and looking forward, what they wanted. And then, of course, with every faculty development survey, we're looking for topics, times, and formats for the professional development our faculty might need. And it's a pretty lengthy survey. There's lots of information, but there's a few highlights that I wanted to share. First is our faculty are resilient and really rose to the occasion. It was very interesting to see faculty report the level of confidence before COVID, their level of confidence in teaching online before COVID, and then their level of confidence now at the end of May, after they've made this quick switch to emergency remote teaching. And we saw a marked increase in their confidence to do this. We also learned, of course, they're looking for continued supports for teaching online and using technology tools, and that our faculty really valued structured discussions, some informal exchanges with colleagues, and time to do that. The individual consultations that we offered with our experts at the center, but also in today's world that interest in 24/7 do-it-yourself resources. A lot of do-it-yourselfers out there who wanted to be able to get to things anytime. Okay, next slide. So in our move from surviving to thriving, we took to heart what we had heard from the faculty in the survey, what we were hearing from faculty in our interactions daily. And one of the things that we did is create an online course design academy. Now, again, remember that the majority of our faculty were not teaching online prior to COVID. So we wanted to provide a chance in June for faculty to work together, responding to their interest in doing something constructive and doing something with peers, and do something hands-on and very practical to prepare for fall. So we created a 3-week facilitated academy for up to 20 faculty. We had 15 who participated in June. It combined asynchronous learning opportunities online with 3 synchronous meetings. We used Zoom, and we used those meetings as an opportunity to do mini workshops on accessibility with universal design for learning, and on assessment and alignment in teaching. The benefits to faculty, first and foremost, is that experience about what it is to be an online student. And if you haven't been an online student yourself, and then you're teaching online, there's a missed opportunity to really understand the experience. And this turned out to be huge for a couple of our faculty members, to be doing what they're asking their students to do. They got an opportunity to complete the Quality Matters Improving Your Online Course workshop. So they were working on a course for fall, making changes, hands-on, getting in there and doing the work with support. They got the chance to collaborate with their peers. They provided feedback to each other. They worked together. And they also got an opportunity to learn about teaching and things about teaching that are going to be relevant regardless of the modality for teaching. So the things that they were just discovering and sharing around alignment of objectives and activities and assessment is relevant, whether you continue to teach online or after COVID and you go back to face-to-face. So this was one of the new opportunities we created in response. Okay, last slide. Oh, no, I have 2 more slides. This was another thing that we did. This was already in the works. At South Central College, we have the Office 365 suite, and SharePoint is one of our tools. This was an easy way for all of the members of the campus community to access 24/7 supports. As I said, we were already working on this, but we really got busy with vetting resources and getting things out there so faculty could take advantage of things 24/7. Next slide. Okay, so finally, some of the quick lessons learned in this experience. And I know it's not over, so we're still learning and we're still working it. But the first I will say, as someone who has been an educational developer, a teacher educator, an educational developer as my vocation for 30 years now, is we found through this experience, and this is true nationally too, centers to support teaching and learning matter. We had dedicated staff there who have backgrounds in teaching, have backgrounds in using academic technology, who know how to work with faculty to make changes, understand the learners, and it was so helpful to have us as the place that faculty could reach out to. So I would just say, if you're at a college and don't have a Center for Teaching and Learning, this is my plug that it's time to have a Center for Teaching and Learning. Second thing, and this will resonate with everyone, is it takes a village, and it takes a village. We had IT support and accessibility services and faculty working with student services to meet the needs of our students. This exposed some of the challenges for students. Anyone working in a community college is aware. It isn't that we didn't know some of our student challenges, but this really exposed some things. One quick example is a faculty member who, when she had to make the switch from face-to-face to online, for the first time really took a step back and looked at the textbook costs for students. And she was kind of aghast at how much it was costing students. So she made the pivot to open educational resources with her new online course. We're going to continue the supports for the mechanics of online teaching, but we need to expand our focus to accessibility and equity in teaching. And finally, this is something that's kind of eating at me, and I've been thinking a lot about, is what can we do to help faculty with the stress that they're experiencing as a result of all of this? So if anybody has any answers, I'd love to hear it. So that's it. Thank you very much for the time.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson. And that's amazing. I think you've done so much to flex and pivot and really address so many concerns across the board. So thank you for all of your efforts.
Thank you.
I'd like to take a moment and introduce my colleague and my friend, Mark Perna. For those of you who have not met Mark or seen him speak before, he's the founder and CEO of TFS, and it's a full-service strategic communications and consulting firm. They are at the forefront of a national platform for a shift in education and workforce development. He's an international generational expert. He's a Forbes.com contributor, and newest is Alexa Flash Briefing. So you can catch Mark there as well. Mark empowers educators and employers to unleash just tremendous potential of today's young people. He delivers more than 70 virtual and in-person keynotes across North America, and he's spoken at Harvard University by a special invitation there. At TFS Results, Mark's team shares his vision of helping organizations experience significant gains in recruitment, engagement, retention, and performance. Mark's award-winning bestseller, Answering Why: Unleashing Passion, Purpose, and Performance in Younger Generations, was written to help educators, employers, and parents understand the millennial and Z generations and help to inspire them to greater performance in all areas of life. You can find out more at markcperna.com. And without further ado, Mark, the stage is yours.
Tony, thank you very much. It's great to be with everyone today. And so I'm going to back you up to mid-March because I want to share a word that comes to mind when we start talking about virtual and trying to thrive in a virtual environment. And the word is petrified. I was scared to death. And as I was preparing for today, in order to be able to share with you kind of some great tools that I use in order to be able to make professional development interesting, in order to be able to engage, in order to be able to go through this process together, to share with you what I have learned just since March, because prior to mid-March, I had never done a virtual meeting. I had never used Zoom. I had used the occasional GoToMeeting, but that was just to get a few people on the line and have a conversation. I didn't know how to present. I didn't know how to do anything that I'm doing right now. And so I had to learn everything from scratch, and it's been an incredible journey to figure this out, because let me back you up to mid-March. In mid-March, now, as Tony said, I do 70 plus keynote speeches a year. I do professional development. I do workshops, deep dive sessions, conferences, conventions. I do all of these things. Plus, I work with not only educators, but I work with Fortune 500 global manufacturers. I work with all kinds of folks. And everything I do is in person, eye to eye, belly to belly, delivering what I do. It's what I know best. And I had just come back on March 12th of this year from the triumphant trip. I was invited, after 24 years of working hard and trying to do all the things that I'm doing, I was finally invited on the Paradise trip. And that was that the state of Hawaii invited me out to fly island to island to island to present to community and technical colleges, K-12 districts, and I was also keynoting a major conference in Honolulu on the last day of the week. This was fantastic. This was the kind of thing I was looking for my whole life. And I got back from that trip on March 12th, and literally within 48 hours, triumphant to broke. Within 48 hours, I had 11 keynote speeches cancel. I had professional development, consulting that I do. I work with community colleges, technical colleges, career centers, unified school districts, comprehensive school districts on how to enroll, retain, and increase performance in younger generations and adult learners. And all of these things, everything went to zero. I have 23 people that support what I do across North America, and we had no revenue. I went from things looked great this year to, oh my God. And this is the way things looked for about a week. For a week, I had trouble sleeping. I had trouble eating. I had trouble, I was panicked. I was short of breath. I was wondering, how am I going to do this? I don't have the kind of money in the bank that I can support everybody for month after month after month. I knew enough at that point that this was going to go longer than a couple of months. And then we started talking about shutting the country down. And I'll never forget this. My team said, we had a team meeting scheduled for somewhere around like the third week of March. And my team said, look, we need to do this virtually. No one wanted to actually get together. And I thought, well, I can't get together for 4 hours virtually. I mean, that's going to stink. How are we going to do that? How am I going to work with my team? And so we got on a Zoom call. It was like the first as a team. And we got together and I laid out in 15 minutes all the bad news. And then I laid out every way we were going to reinvent what we do. And we reinvented everything. And I want to share with you some of the things that I've been doing to reinvent being able to use this frame that I'm in order to be able to deliver a message, in order to be able to do professional development, in order to be able to take what we used to do in person and now do, virtually. Because in what I do and the work, path that I'm on is I am twice as busy today that I was prior to COVID. Where I used to do 12 to 15 different engagements throughout a month, I'm between 28 and 30 averaging right now for the next 3 to 4 months. So because I'm virtual, I can get to more places and I can deliver that message. and I'm working with teams all day long. I might have full day virtual meetings. I know that sounds crazy, doesn't it? I never would have imagined that. Prior to mid-March of this year, if you would have told me that one day I would be doing all day virtual meetings, I would have said, there's no way. There's no way I'll do that. People said, Mark, you don't need to travel as much. But I started doing all day meetings. And I want to share with you today how I make those interesting, how I make it, invigorating, how I can keep people engaged, because that's what we have to do in our professional development with our teaching staffs. That's what we have to do with our students. That's how we have to, connect the dots so that we're getting our message across and we're getting people to take action in what we want them to take action with. And so I created the 3 pillars of virtual engagement and the things that we need to focus on as we start to move forward and we start to tell very powerful stories. Because I never imagined, I have 3 new clients that I've started working with over the last month, 3 new ones in the middle of a pandemic. And they're huge school districts. One's outside of Los Angeles, one's in Arizona, and the other one is on the East Coast. And as I started working with them, I said, we're going to do 2 full days back to back with a team of 20 to 22 people. And we're going to start this, and we're going to put together 3 hours, an hour off for lunch, 3 hours, and we're going to do it 2 days in a row. And people were like, there's no way. I mean, that just sounds brutal. You're probably thinking to yourself, that sounds brutal. And I'm like, we do it. And people walk out thrilled with what we've done. So here's what happens. The first point is communication. The first pillar, communication. And communication is important because communication in a virtual world is different than it is in an in-person world, because we don't have the ability of putting people right in front of us and making sure that they're paying attention. Sure, you're all on a webinar right now. I have no idea what all of you are doing. You know what I'm doing because you can see me. I can't see you. Some of you are doing emails. Some of you may be, intently focused on the presentation. Others may be cutting their lawn for all I know. But in communication, there are several key factors that I incorporate into everything I do, and at least try to do. The first one is welcome. I love welcoming people. So when I'm doing a professional development with a teaching staff, and I've done tons of these over the last 4 or 5 months. So I might have 50, I might have 100, I might have 400, but I do the same thing. I love to use Zoom meetings so I can see people actually coming into the meeting as opposed to doing a webinar. I love to see people. I love to ask them to rename themselves, and I love to actually meet and welcome each person as they come into the meeting. Now with 400, I can't do each person, but I can spot do it. But I can, because I believe this, is that people will listen significantly more intently to someone they have met than someone they don't know. If it's a perfect stranger, like right now, I'm a perfect stranger to most of you. Most of you have no idea who I am. You may never have heard me. You may never have seen my Forbes articles that I write weekly. So some of you might be saying to yourself, who is this? Well, if we had had a chance to be in a room together today, I would have met each and every one of you. So, it's so welcoming and getting to know someone, even in a brief moment, even if it's just to say, hi, good afternoon, I'm Mark Perna. John, it's very nice to meet you. Even being able to do that tends to open people's minds up to professional development. Being genuine, of course, positive. Some of these are obvious. Eye contact. Notice that I'm spending most of my time looking at the camera. I'm looking directly at you, all of you. Right now, there's over 50, 60 people on this particular webinar, and I'm trying to deliver a message directly to you. And where this really came to me as a slam dunk in eye contact in a virtual world is I was asked to do my first keynote speech early April. I got a call from the state of Hawaii, and there was an organization there who said, hey, we saw you when you were out a few weeks earlier, and we figured that it would be really hard to get you for like the next year, but we assumed that with the pandemic that maybe your schedule's opened up. They were pretty intuitive, actually. And I said, well, actually, strange you should ask, it has. And they said, well, we would love to get you to inspire our staff. We've got about 200 teachers. And would you get on and would you, run through your, 90-minute keynote speech? And I said, I would be honored to. And so we set the date. It was early April. I got on, I spoke for 90 minutes. And the one thing I did ask them, I said, is it possible for us to do the 90 minutes over 2 hours? To actually extend it 30 minutes. I said, because what I would love to do is instead of going just 90 minutes nonstop, could I do 2 hours so that I can stop and I can engage the audience? So I could take questions in the chat, comments, and we could talk and we could have a real kind of back and forth. And they said, that sounds great, let's do that. So we did 2 hours nonstop. When I was done, what I saw was that the evaluations that people were filling out said exactly the same things that when I was doing things in person. And this taught me, I was like, well, all right, then in virtual, we can make an impression. We can make it through this little box and get a message across. The thing that stood out to me was how many people, as part of their evaluation response, said, I felt like he was talking directly to me. So what I would love to impart upon you on this point is make eye contact, look directly into the camera, because as I'm looking into the eye of the camera, I'm looking into those who are looking into their laptops or their computer screens, and you'll be able to deliver a message directly to those individuals. What you do has to be interesting. You have to find a way to make it interesting. You have to frame the session. I realized, and this was important in person, but it's particularly important in a virtual environment, is framing what it is we're doing, how we're going to do it, and what does all of this mean? And so that people understand as they come along on this journey with you, whether it's 10, 20, 100, they all have to understand what is the goal and the purpose of what's happening. So framing the session and taking the time to frame it effectively, I have gotten better and better at that. Still not perfect. There's still ways for me to improve what I do every day, but I've certainly come a long way in just 6 months from absolute petrified to now being pretty comfortable in front of a camera and being able to deliver, a message that is, largely coming from my heart. And then compelling stories and attention phrases. So compelling stories. I love to tell stories. I said one at the beginning of this talk together, as we started off in mid-March and going to Hawaii. I love relating to people based on stories because people can relate to where you've been and how you've gotten there. Normally when I speak around the country, I'm talking about how to unleash passion, purpose, and performance in younger generations and how to get them to see a light at the end of the tunnel and how to take one step after another step after another step. And those are the things I'm not talking about today, which is unusual for me because those are the things that I'm equipped to talk about with such great passion. And yet, to talk about the virtual world and how we connect with people and how we drive it. I mean, even look at the graphics that I'm showing you today. Notice this doesn't look like a typical Zoom meeting. I'm using OBS streaming software. It's free on the internet. You can pull it down. And my team helped create the images and the looks that you see so that I could change how I tell a story. So, I can change the size of the screen. I can make it smaller and myself larger. I can go with just a full webcam. And so all of this I can do on the fly as I'm delivering a presentation to make sure that things that, need more scrutiny by the audience, I can make them larger, and things that don't need as much scrutiny, I can make them smaller, and I can deliver a message via the stories that I tell and the images that I use. And as far as attention phrases, I thought I would put together a couple of attention phrases just to get you thinking. These are phrases I love to use, and these are just things that naturally flow out of me when I'm working with any size group. If I'm working in an ongoing way, hey, it's great to see you. What do you think? Please tell me more. I love asking people to tell me more. To get engagement in a professional development scenario where you want people to be part of that process, I find please tell me more, especially when someone has said something that's interesting and they're really contributing to what we're doing and how we're moving forward. I believe that helps a great deal. Allow me to be candid. I love this phrase because it gets people to perk up a little bit. Allow me to be candid. Wow, he's going to be candid. Frankly, I'm always candid, but to allow me to be candid puts a spotlight on what comes next and the importance of what we're delivering at that point. Here's what I think, and this is why and how we're going to be moving forward. I love to help people understand where I want to take them, how we're going to get there, and what are we going to get out of it. And so I use attention phrases just to bring people back to the center. I love whenever I'm doing a presentation of any kind, I love to ask people to turn their videos on. I find that people pay attention with their videos on way more than if they turn the videos off. So I use, for instance, I'm doing parent webinars across the country. They start actually this Monday. My first one's in Iowa, and I'm crossing the country, and I'm doing these over the next 2 months just to shift the paradigm in education workforce development in this country. Trying to close the skills gap, we have to start with students and with parents and community members and, legislators, et cetera. And so when I tell a story to this group, I like to see them on the screen. That's a personal preference. So I actually have a Zoom license of up to 1,000 so that I can actually see and page through the audience. And I ask people if they're comfortable to turn their videos on so that I can see people. I can ask them to raise their hand. When I'm giving a keynote speech, I can actually engage with a large number of people on my second screen. And I can say, how many of you have ever done this? Boom. And I can get a quick look. I don't even have to do a poll to do that. I can simply say, how many of you? And they can give me the thumbs up. They can give me the hand wave, digitally. But you know what? Sometimes it's easy just in the span of being in front of the camera to just go like this. So I can get some pretty quick feedback doing this. I can have people in the chat respond to questions, answers. What do they think? How can we, move forward? And try to continually drive, within that virtual environment, the connection that we have. The more people feel connected, the more you'll get out of them. The more they have the ability to distance themselves. Students are great at that. I speak to student organizations as well. Students can do that. If they turn the video off, they feel disconnected. The psychology of that's powerful. So where possible, get people to turn their cameras on, get them to be engaged, get them to be a part of what we're talking about. You can take frequent breaks. I normally take one every between 60 and 90 minutes. And I know that sounds like a lot. Sounds like a long time. Seems like you should break every 15 or 20 minutes. But I tell every group that I'm working with in a virtual environment, I'm going to be taking a break at about, this time. If you need to go in the meantime, please feel free to just mute your video for a moment and take a comfort break. But this is when we're going to take an official 10-minute break, and then everybody just kind of mutes out. So I try to keep it moving. I try to get everybody in the zone and try to get people to understand kind of where we're going and how we're going to get there. The second pillar beyond communication is interaction. To me, interaction is key and being able to do some stuff. So this is a webinar. It didn't give me the same kinds of tools that I could use if this was a Zoom meeting today. But if I was using Zoom meeting, as I do with most of my professional developments, questions and answers. I love to ask questions. I love to give challenges to my audiences and my professional development groups and my teams by asking a simple question. Please put the answer into the chat, and watch the chat go with all the, sometimes I can't keep up with it. It starts moving so fast, especially with a larger audience. But I can say, what, happened here and what was, and so whatever question I ask, they can answer in the chat. They can actually give information that I'm asking for so that they're helping others. And the more you can engage in PD with, either educators or students, but the more you can get them engaged with that. So being able to ask questions, give answers, where they give answers, but they can also ask questions and have that dialogue. Chats, polls, breakout rooms, I've used it all. And I think, depending on how you use it and when you use it, it can be dynamic. I love breakout rooms to do brainstorm sessions. So to take a group of 20 and create 4 rooms of 5 people each, where I can then, as the facilitator, drop into each room. It allows me to build a personal relationship with a smaller group. Even if it's for 30 seconds while they're working on a 10-minute breakout, I can drop into each one, see how they're doing. Do they have any questions? And it allows me to interact. And what always happens is, coming out of the breakout, I have a better relationship with everybody that was there in the professional development. So it allows them to get together, to talk, to come up with solutions and bring those to the rest of the group. Breakout sessions, at least on Zoom, I can tell you, can be timed. So I can time it for 10 minutes. It'll automatically close at the end of 10 minutes. But the ability to do that, I think, is pretty powerful to run brainstorm sessions. And then one of my favorite things to do with every group I work with, you probably can do this up to about 30. Any more than that, you really can't do this unless you spot do it, but go around the horn. That was a term we used to use in Little League baseball. We used to throw the ball. We used to go around the horn, right? You throw it around to all the bases and everything. So so going around the horn to me is great fun. I love hearing what people think. And so what I do is I look at everybody that's in the meeting or what we're doing, and I just start at the top left and I work all the way around and I say, look, you've got 30 seconds. I want to know what you're thinking, what comment you may have, and you can toss a quick question if you need any clarification on anything. And I say their name and I jump to them. And I have that conversation, and what I do so that people are prepared, because one of the biggest challenges I think we have today in virtual is people unmuting themselves. It takes a while. Sometimes they have to find it. And if they haven't unmuted in a while, they can't remember how to grab it, how to do it. By the way, just a little tip on Zoom. I can't speak for the other platforms, but I suspect it could be universal. Most of the time, it doesn't work. It depends on the laptop and the Chromebooks and, the systems that you're using. But if you're muted and you hit and hold your space bar, you can then speak and then release the space bar and it'll remute you, if that helps you at all. So, but going around the horn, what I'll usually say is, John, you're up, 30 seconds, go. Beverly, you're next. And then Beverly knows that she needs to unmute by the time, John is done. And that way I keep it moving, bang, 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 bang. I can get feedback. Everybody gets to hear where everybody is at. It's kind of, I also call it taking your temperature, to seeing what the audience is seeing, what questions they might have, and how do we continue moving forward in that particular session. So that's going around the horn. So that's interaction. And then there's purpose. I want to hit this one kind of hard, because to me, to be virtual puts most people at a disadvantage when they start, because being virtual, you have to have that additional layer of the things we've talked about, the communication, the interaction, in order to be able to drive the connectivity with your audience. So from a purpose perspective, you need to be able to answer why. Why are we doing this? Why is this important? How will I use this today or in the future? What is this, legit or just busy work that you're giving me with? This, to me, is one of the most critical issues I see in both professional development and teaching students at adult level or high school levels, is that we are giving young people today and learners in general too much busy work. They need to understand why it's important, how it helps them move down their tunnel towards a light at the end of their tunnel, so that what they get out of this is worth the journey and the work and effort to put into it. And so that's one of the things I think that I think everyone can improve on, myself included. I am not perfect yet at the virtual world. I keep trying to adapt. I keep trying to calibrate. I keep trying to raise the level of my game so that I can impact solidly and positively every audience that I get a chance to interact with. So is this legit or just busy work? By the way, these are good litmus point questions to ask at any point in the creation of your lesson plan or what you're doing as a PD. Why is this important? If you don't have good answers for this, why this is important, how I'll use it today and in the future, and is this legit and busy work, and are you wasting my time and money? If you can't answer those questions, then they will certainly be asking them and coming up with the answer you don't want. So I use these a lot in my head. I've never actually written them down, but I ask this of myself every day. Why is this important? How can I help move, an organization forward? How can I give them the tools and the strategies and the best practices necessary for them to be able to get the biggest bang and impact out of the things that we're talking about today and we're trying to move to? And a lot of what I do is to try to shift the paradigm in education and workforce development, get people to think differently. And 3 or 4 weeks ago, when we did the previous webinar with the Ncatc, was talking about shifting the paradigm and how do we get communities to think differently? How do we bring the mayor's office and chambers of commerce and economic development professionals along with our K-12 system, our community college system, and how do we put them on the same side of the table and get everyone to think differently about the power of robust academic knowledge, technical competencies, and professional skills? How do we get them to understand that students need all of these things? And our community college system is geared perfectly to deliver academic knowledge and powerful technical and professional skills. And so the community college system sits at the perfect time in history to be doing what you do, because the paradigms of old are shifting. And by doing it virtually, it allows us to have, easy, quick conversations with large groups of people, which is why I'm doing parent webinars to shift the paradigm and talk about how do you create a competitive advantage in your young person? How do you unleash their passion, purpose, performance so that we can take them to the next level? What options and opportunities are available to young people today that most people don't know about? The organizations that are looking at me right now, you sit at the perfect time in history to shift those paradigms and to get people to think differently, because everyone here, advanced technology centers, right? We're talking about precision machine and welding and mechatronics and all of these different programs that are so critically important today that we have to get people to understand the importance, the value, the options, the opportunities that are available to young people. And that's what allows me to do this in a much greater way virtually. We all have this ability, you as well as me, to be able to use this new medium with passion and with enthusiasm, because it'll allow us to tell a very powerful story with all of the people we need to tell that story. And so that's it, communication, interaction, and purpose. So let me punctuate this. So I was invited to give a speech in upstate New York, and this was about 1.5 years ago, and I was invited to the Adirondack Mountains. And it's a beautiful part of the country. If you've never been up in that area, and a part of beautiful mountains and very, forests, and it's gorgeous. And I was invited to speak to 7 school districts that were rural, that were all coming to one location. So they were bringing all their teaching staff, administrators, critical support staff members on buses out to this one location. And it happened to be the hottest day in 10 years, or so that's what they told me. But when I got there, it was hot. And I walked into the place where I was going to be doing this, and there was no air conditioning in the gymnasium. They had 700-800 chairs down. They were waiting for the buses to roll up. We were doing it at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on the hottest day in 10 years. It was extraordinary. I was wearing a sport coat. I had some slacks on, and I start getting ready for this speech, knowing it's going to be hot, uncomfortable. It was a little musty and smelly in the room, and you could feel the humidity. And I put on my lapel microphone, and it didn't work well. I mean, the sound system was crackly. It was one of those sound systems where about every 8th to 10th word would kind of drop out, and you wouldn't be able to make it out. So I knew I was going to have to raise my voice to a level to go beyond the sound system to reach 7 to 800 people in this entire gymnasium. And so I'm getting ready to get started, and the buses have all unloaded, and there's 700-800 people sitting there waiting, and they're all waving these flyers that were sitting on the chairs because they're trying to cool off. And let me paint the picture for you. I'm in a hostile environment here because it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon, hottest day in 10 years. It's hot, it's humid, and the staff that came from all these schools do not want professional development. In my view, most of those people that afternoon would rather be getting a root canal than listening to me deliver a speech, whether in person or virtually. And so I get started, and right as I'm getting ready to start, they come up to me and they said, "Mark, we had an idea. We think we can cool it off just a little bit." And I said, "I'm game. What are you doing?" They said, "We're going to open up the 4 doors to the 4 corners of the gymnasium, and we're going to put in these big, huge industrial fans." Have you ever heard these fans? They're like jet engines. And so now I had to scream over the sound system, over the jet engines, and speak to these 700 to 800 folks that are sitting here who are hot, uncomfortable, and they can't wait to get out of this room. And it's a 90-minute speech. I'm 10 minutes into this, and I am sweating more than I think I have ever sweat working out. I was sopping wet. I was dripping wet. My hair was soaking wet. It was dripping down my face. Have you ever sweat so much that you were afraid to take off an article of clothing? Seriously, I was afraid to take my sport coat off because I knew that I was sweat completely through my shirt and that I was even sweating through my sport coat. So I decided to leave it on. That's how much I was sweating. 10 minutes into the speech, as if it couldn't get any worse. That's when the flies came in. Yeah, I'm talking Old Testament here. I'm talking 1,000-some flies. I don't know where they came from. I don't know who invited them, but they were in the house. And not only were they in the house, but 50 or so of them took up space right here in front of my face. I have never seen anything like it since. I have never seen anything like it beforehand, but there were 40 to 50 flies flying in front of my face for the balance of 80 minutes of doing this presentation. It didn't matter where I went. If I moved, they followed me, and they would constantly come back in front of my face, and I couldn't do anything to get rid of them. It was so uncomfortable. I even felt like they were landing on my head because I could feel them landing on my sweat, and I felt like they were dying in rivers of sweat going down into my shirt collar where there was apparently some graveyard for flies. And so so let me give you an idea what this looked like, okay? So this is a graphic representation of what it looked like that day. Now, I didn't actually take a picture. This is just a graphic representation of what the flies looked like on that particular day. So and my flies were a little bit bigger. My flies were a little more bunched together, but this is a pretty decent look at what I was looking at. And for 3 or 4 minutes, I was completely distracted. I mean, these flies were a huge distraction to me. I couldn't remember what I was speaking about. I no longer was I interested in speaking to, the 700 to 800 people that were sitting in front of me. I was now interested in how am I getting rid of these flies because they're annoying and they're in my way. And for 3 or 4 minutes, which seemed like an eternity, all I could see were the flies. Until I got to a point where I realized, the flies are going to be there one way or the other. And when that happened, I was able to look past the flies to the purpose I had there that day, which was the audience. And that I needed to deliver a powerful message to the people who were uncomfortable and the people who maybe didn't want to be there when they got there. But I needed to take them from where they were, which is what we have to do with every audience in PD or in, with our students. And we have to get them to where we need to get them to. We have to create the reality of the lesson and what we're trying to get them to do and actions we want them to take so that we can continue to make a bigger difference in those within our sphere of influence. And so I went from focusing on the flies to focusing on the purpose, which made all the difference. Now, in real life, outside of this presentation I was delivering, don't we all have flies? Right? We all have, I have flies, you have flies, we all have flies. COVID is a humongous fly, right? And all the things associated with it, doing virtual, engagement, in person, hybrid for some of you. All of the things that we're doing this year are considered flies, things that may be going on at home with our families, in our professional lives in general. We all have flies. But if you can look past the flies to the purpose, which is why purpose is so important in everything we do, but keep in mind that your audience has flies too. Whoever you're talking to, students, adult learners, high school learners, whether you're talking to your professional development, whether you're talking to your staff, whether you're talking to your critical support staff or your teaching staff or your academic faculty or your career tech faculty, whoever you're dealing with has flies. And the purpose that you create for them and for what you're doing and talking about is what will determine if they will look past the flies to the importance of what you're delivering. And that is good virtual engagement. I want to thank you for taking some time with me this afternoon. If you'd love to reach out and see what I'm doing, you can reach out to me at markcperna.com. I've written a best-selling book. It's won 8 National Book Awards. This book was designed to shift the paradigm in education and workforce development. And I'm very proud of what it has accomplished. I'm most proud of the bottom award, which is the Nautilus Book Award, which is given to books that are thought to make a positive difference in the world. Previous winners of that were the Dalai Lama, Deepak Chopra, and Simon Sinek the year before I won it. So I'm very proud of that. I have free resources on my website. If you would like to just check in and see what I do, there's a full book study discussion guide. There's also a parent-child career conversation starter and some action guides. I write weekly for Forbes.com, and so I write articles that shift the paradigm. I talk about the skills gap. I talk about, obviously, career education, the things that you see in front of you. But I also speak about, what's going on in the world of workforce development and how we get and shift that paradigm nationwide. I'm even doing my first Education with Purpose conference. It's going to be an annual conference starting in 2021, which is going to be focused. It's going to be in the Cleveland area, and it's going to be focused on making students career ready in this country, period, instead of college and career ready. We're going to make them career ready, period, which is part of my Education with Purpose philosophy. But if you have a desire to check in and see what that's all about, you can also check it out too. And with that, I am going to turn it back to my friend, Craig Ncatc. Craig, you're on.
So very positive. I'm not sweating, but I'm really pumped up, Mark, from all of your exuberance and passion and knowledge that you've shared with us today. And I'm on the tipping point of calling you the new Lord of the Flies, but I don't think that's appropriate in this case. But I think the story with distractions is a huge, a really important one to keep in the back of your mind, because distractions can derail all kinds of things, especially in a virtual world. So you hit a home run again for us, and I'm looking forward to you being around for the Q&A with Dr. Johnson, and of course our Sally Kay coming up in a few seconds here as well. We've got some good questions coming in, but thank you very much, Mark. And now I'm going to introduce Sally Kay, also known as Sarah Janes. Dr. Janes currently serves as the Associate Vice Chancellor for Continuing and Professional Development at San Jacinto College in Houston, Texas. And I'm so glad she's back in her office, because earlier this week she was sequestered at home because of Beta, and that's the name of this tropical storm that was wreaking havoc on Texas again. So we're glad you're back in your office, Sally. You joined San Jacinto District over 32 years ago, from what I know, and you've held previous positions of VP Continuing Ed and Professional Development, as well as Dean of Instruction and Academic Dean, and of course a University Connector Coordinator, and earlier on a math faculty. So you've got a whole career path of education behind you to get us to today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Sally Kay Janes from San Jacinto College in Texas. Sally?
Thank you, Craig. I certainly appreciate that introduction. And Mark, thank you. I'm going to go check on this OBS streaming software, because it looks quite interesting, and it will fit right in with some of the things that we're trying to do. Today you can see we're talking about professional development and instruction. And so if you'll move to the next slide, a couple of the things that I'm going to talk about and let you know is that I am over the non-credit area of San Jacinto College, and we serve over 40,000 students in general over the southeastern portion of Harris County and beyond. And so when COVID hit us, we focus on, excuse me, we focus on open enrollment classes, contract classes, and grant classes. Our classes are not necessarily on the typical credit side schedule. And so, we also live off of our revenue to pay our expenses. So when COVID hit, we had trouble fulfilling all of our commitments to students for a while there. And so we had to string them through the summer. And so as we ended through the summer, I started thinking about, okay, what are we going to be doing to get our business back? And we had to do that in order to sustain ourselves. And so when we looked at both our contract classes, we knew that our industry wanted face-to-face. Well, we had to coerce them, so to speak, into a different type of delivery. When we look at grant classes, some of those can be taught in the evening, but if we're working with our Texas Workforce Commission, their classes have to be taught in order to get funding from them. Those classes have to be taught during the workday. And so that means 8-hour classes. So who wants to sit in front of a computer for 8 hours? So we had to think about things like that. And as I said, we had to convince them that what we could present was in their best interest and was really fulfilling to them, and they would get what they needed out of it. So today I'm going to give you some two basic examples of, well, one basic technology operation that's very simple and easy, and then show you the different places where we used it and why. And those two examples will be in terms of class presentation and then in professional development. And as you see here, the picture, you see a couple of or 5 of my employees with a carrot. Well, during our professional development, we give carrot awards. And so part of my thinking was, how can I make what we generally do in a face-to-face situation for 8 hours, something that's very engaging and that my employees will enjoy for 4 hours. So as we look at the next slide, what we'll be talking about first are the class presentations. So if we look first at if you can move the slide, there we go. One way we were doing it before we came up with this separate type of technology, we were looking at a different way of presenting online classes. And so what we are doing in many of our classes, particularly if they can be, if they don't have to be taught strictly in during the 8-hour day, let's say it's an 8-hour class. Well, the first class meeting is actually face-to-face. It's online, but everybody comes together for about 1/4 of the class time, about an hour, hour and a half, so that everybody can convene together. They convene on Zoom. Zoom is our method of, is our platform. And they convene on Zoom and everybody gets to know each other, particularly with the instructor, and she explains, if this is in particular a corporate training session, how to use the technology, how the class is going to be set up, and what their expectations are. She will do the last, or they do, the last class meeting in basically the same way and come together for closure. All the other hours in between are at the student's convenience. And we have found this to be a very, very popular way to engage our students and let them feel comfortable with an online environment, and where they wanted, they don't typically want online, having these times where they can come face to face with the instructor and other students has really made them more comfortable. The technology that I'm going to show you in just a minute is mainly for class demonstrations and can be used in classes such as cake decorating, even in some leadership courses, and actually when you have to show students how to work with tools. And this can be done intermittently with some online class demonstrations. So next, as we look at the professional development that I told you about, I decided that if I wanted them to do what I thought would be helpful to them, I couldn't just tell them what to do. I had to lead them. I had to show them that it was simple and that it worked. And so if you'll look at this brief video of the very first time that I did it, you can see that it really works. So Trey, if you will hit the button there, I'd appreciate it.
So I want to welcome you all to the CPD Fall 2020 Convocation. And our theme is planning in the right direction for our future. And that's going to be our theme pretty much all year long. We want to plan, but there's also a piece of it.
So you can see there that it was just like everybody was looking at me, and I'm going to talk about the technology and the different techniques and things you need to watch for in just a little bit. But I am not a person to sit behind a desk. When I'm talking, I don't even stand at a podium. I tend to move around, and they expect that of me. And so when I was looking at this, our professional development through the CPD Convocation, I wanted to make it as real for them as I could so that they could relate to what we were doing. You see the carrot there? When we were given these carrot awards, I had my administrative assistant at the other end of the table where all the technology was, and I would throw the carrots as if I were throwing them to an individual who was going to receive them. The other thing that this type of project would give in the technology, and you can see in the bottom picture, you can see the laptop, but we did the chat screen on a larger monitor. So as I was working with the group, and it was a group of about 60 people, I could look at the chat and converse with them as if we were in the same room. I could see the chat and I could say, oh, Aminta, I see, let me answer your question in just a minute. Or Oscar, thank you for asking that. I can explain it to you as we go right now, and would share different things with them. When you're in a panel discussion, just seeing folks sitting at a desk is fine. But when you're in a classroom discussion or when you're in a 4-hour period, sometimes it's better to actually tend to make it more of a real situation. So how did we do that? So in the next slide, I will show you what you need for the setup. And as you see here, you can see the laptop, you can see a tripod with a webcam on top. Then you see the extra monitor, and over to in the back, you can also see a podium with another laptop that is functioning with an overhead projector that is shining on a screen. You might want to use a mic that's there. I didn't have to use one. I have a loud enough teacher voice to take care of that. But I can tell you the tripod that we ended up purchasing cost between $40 and $50, and it rises quite high, or can go quite low. It's very flexible. The webcam is one that I took off my computer. The college gives us all a webcam. It's a really good webcam. So we put that on top of the tripod. And then the monitor was just an extra monitor from my office. So at most you would be spending about $60 if you don't already have this equipment, but the setup is very, very simple. But there's some tips I would like to give you about this setup. And one is, and I know this is it doesn't look like a good picture, and that's my point. First of all, you want to look at dark backgrounds for your PowerPoints. The previous video that I showed you had a white background. That was on a screen on the wall. It was done in bright lights because I had a wall of windows, and to cover up some of that light, I just used large pieces of material and tablecloths to tape on the windows there so the glare wouldn't come in. But in looking at the two setups, the white background for that previous screen did not show the print as well. This screen is a 6-foot screen that drops down from the ceiling, and the darker background with the white print is much more legible. The one thing you need to watch out for is obviously lighting. So you want the light facing you, not behind you. And you really want to check the lighting on the speaker. Now, as it turns out, I'm short. And if I weren't standing on a stool in that picture, my head would just be beneath the screen. So you need to watch things like that. We have since purchased just a very inexpensive small lamp from a discount store that we can bend and twist any which way. It's in front of me, and so or whoever the speaker is, and it can be faced upward towards you. And all of this setup can be done by one person. It's not that difficult. Having a second would be even better, but one person works just fine. And so finally, what I want to tell you in the next slide is that you don't have to have a talking head. You can have a person that is moving and facilitating as they're used to doing in front of you. I've even done this in a presentation where there were 2 of us with a 6-foot screen behind us, and we could be socially distanced, and even when Q&As came aboard. So it's a very easy way to work things, and I offer it up to you as an opportunity. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. Our speakers have just been absolutely fantastic today, and I want to thank them for their time. We'll be opening up for Q&A in just a few moments, but we do want to have a word from our strategic partner, Zeiss. Zeiss is a fantastic strategic partner. Thank you to them. We were able to offer this webinar at no charge for all of you. And I'd like to take a moment to invite you to hear both Allie and Alicia. Allie Ray has previous experience working in biomedical, mechanical, and manufacturing engineering. Her current responsibilities at Zeiss include software and hardware training, providing technical support, and machine sales for education. Her team works with customers all over the country to provide metrology solutions for both students and instructors. And then we also have Alicia, who's the application's internal training and development manager. She's worked at Zeiss for over 10 years in various roles, including applications engineer, customer education manager, and her current role as the application's internal training and development manager. Alicia's team is responsible for the development and implementation of Zeiss training with an important focus on e-learning and remote learning development and delivery. Thank you so much, ladies. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Tony. So we can go to the next slide, but basically what I want to do for you guys today is tell you a little bit about the educational program that we have at Zeiss, as well as kind of our response to COVID as well, and what we have to offer for you guys or all of our customers as far as education in metrology. So you can go to the next slide. So those of you guys that don't know about Zeiss, you might know us through our hunting, optical, any sort of, microscopes. I'm wearing my Zeiss glasses today. That's what we're kind of known for by the name. But what we do is industrial metrology. So 170 years ago, it was, starting with our microscopes. But because our microscopes and our optical systems were such high precision, we needed a machine that measured it. So we just celebrated our 100 year last year in the industrial metrology to create something that we could measure our high precision microscopes and optics with. You can go to the next slide. So basically our idea behind why we're trying to get into the educational platform is we see that machining is heading from manual machining to CNC. That's just how the industry is trending right now. So instead of doing all of your metrology with your basic micrometers, your calipers, it's moving towards the CNC automation world. And those are the solutions that we are offering to our customers is a higher automation and then as well teaching your students so they're ready for that industry standard. You can go ahead to the next slide. So the biggest difference and between manual and CNC is your basic 2-point measurement. We all know there's no such thing as a perfect circle. So you can see on the left here, we have any 2 points that you take in this non-perfect circle. They're all going to give you different reliabilities, different answers. So with our technology, you can actually do a point cloud overlay and take multiple points, thousands of points along a surface at a fraction of the time. So this will give you the best representation of your high points and low points on your physical CAD model. And with that software additive, you can actually see on top of, say, your 3D model where your high and low points are and where you're kind of getting that local extrema. Go ahead to the next slide. So we offer a range of technologies anywhere from your contact CMM, and those can be shop floor as well as clean room. We do offer the multi-sensors, the non-contact, so the opticals, 3D scanning, and then we also have computer tomography, as well as some X-ray solutions and some service finish that we offer at a discounted rate for all of our educational customers. Go ahead to the next slide. So the biggest thing is our COVID response. And this has been kind of the biggest forefront. We did kind of a survey of our current customers, and most of them had said that if they are not hybrid right now, they're bracing for impact. They're waiting for that outbreak. They want to make sure that they have a backup plan for that virtual learning. So what we did is we developed kind of an online competency course. So we wanted to take anything that you could learn on your software and put it into a curriculum that you could apply to those online courses. So go ahead to the next slide. So in order to get access to these online courses or e-learnings, as we like to call them, we use a portal system. So in this portal system, our customers can see any sort of updates on their software, there's service packs available, but also this is where our technical service as well as our academy metrology is what we call it, is housed. So go ahead to the next slide. So what we offer in our e-learning platform is you can actually do software simulation. So it's kind of an interactive where you can actually click on the screen as if it's the software pulled up for you. So in that teaching environment, you can have your student, you know, simulate clicking through the software where there's actual buttons that are just simulated to be just similar to the software, and explain it through a different interaction. There's also some videos that are combined within each of the e-learnings. So let's say you hit run on the machine. Well, there's no machine that they have sitting in, you know, their bedroom or their office space. They don't have a machine sitting there, a CMM, a 3D scanner. So when they hit the run button, there's actually going to be a video that comes up that kind of shows you what would actually happen if you had that machine with you. Go ahead to the next slide. The other thing is you can repeat the modules as many times as you want. So I was always one of those students that wanted to see things, pause it, take it in, maybe take notes the second time I went through, just so I understood it completely. The other thing that you can see is the interactive quizzes. So this can be utilized in your classroom settings, or you can actually take some of those quizzes and put them into maybe, you know, your course format where you have those quizzes put on, you know, weekly quizzes, those sort of things. So you can understand that your students went through it, understand it, and also check their competency. Go ahead to the next slide. The thing I really love about the software is there is some, you know, choose your own adventure. That's how I like to look at it. You can click through a self-guided learning. So let's say I already understand one portion, say the qualification. Well, I want to go back and I want to actually see why I need the qualification, but then I forgot how to do the qualification. So you can actually kind of choose your own adventure and how you want to walk through that. And then finally, you can actually select, there's different ideas behind each thing. So you can select different machines or different interests that your students might have. So let's say they have an interest in optical, they can choose those different things. So that's basically how we've responded at Zeiss. I'm going to go ahead and open it up for any questions, I believe for the whole presentations that were given.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We're going to bring all of our panelists back on screen, and Alicia and I are going to run through a few questions that we have here. We do have one that came in from the audience that is actually a great question, and I'll put this out here for any of our participants to answer. And that is, has anyone implemented mobile vehicle learning? So for example, one that is set up as a lab for in-person hands-on skills assessments. And the question is specifically of healthcare students, but I really think this could go for any of our career and tech ed arenas as well.
We have not at Ncatc.
Well, come on, Sally, let's pick up the pace over there.
We had enough trouble trying to get things.
Sorry, Sally, I didn't mean to put you on the spot like that.
And my answer is I'm not sure. I wish my career and technical education, the dean was here with me, because I know, you know, in that moment we were exploring all kinds of options, and we had, you know, a mechatronics instructor who had equipment that he met students in the parking lot and gave them that equipment, and they went back and did stuff at home, and he used Zoom to work with them in order to do the distance thing. I know there was a lot of looking around for simulation software, but to this particular one, I don't know. I don't know.
I think you'd run into an issue with space and sterilization in most of those mobile labs.
Sure.
I've been recently graduated from the paramedic program, and they had a module that you could do, but I'd imagine they weren't doing any of that during any of the current situation because of the spacing. And I think you have to keep teachers a certain distance away from students as well within that 6-foot radius. So Alicia, do you want to ask the next question for our panelists?
Sure, absolutely. How have you assisted your faculty or staff in the adaptation to virtual or distance learning and training? Anyone in particular like to take that one?
I'd like to start just from my perspective, teaching people where the mute and unmute button is. That was the first major step. Any of you can pick it up from there.
I'm the same with my elementary school kids. You are on mute, right? When they were distance learning, so.
I think one of the things that's been most helpful, and we had access to Zoom prior to the COVID break. Zoom was purchased by our system and made available to all the colleges and universities in the system. It wasn't being used to this extent at all. Obviously, it was, if you had meetings and you had people on different campuses, we could use Zoom for that. But we quickly realized that the beauty of this was being able to share screens and look real time at things with each other. So our academic technology staff, if someone was having trouble with a learning management system and weren't quite sure how to do things, it was a really easy way to set up a one-on-one time, pull up your screen, let's see what you're looking at, you know, and work on something together. So in a way, we were able to, you know, mimic what we would do if somebody walked into the center and sat down at the computer with you and we looked at it together. And it actually, feedback is that people really have appreciated this remote option, I think, more than they realized, because you don't have to come to campus. If you're a faculty member and you're working on something at home, or you're on one of on one campus and our staff members somewhere else, this has allowed us to do one-on-one, real-time work to assist with things. So that has been a very useful tool for us.
Fantastic.
Right, Kimberly, and I will agree with you on that. One thing that Ncatc has is an educational technology division. And so ever since Harvey, you know, we get hit by hurricanes. Ever since Harvey, anytime you create a class, you automatically get a Blackboard shell. And so we already had those things, but they weren't always being used. And so our educational technology division really kicked up the pace, and we required all the faculty to go through more Blackboard training just so they could have that piece of it in there. And then individually we would share with each other, particularly in my division, with the continuing and professional development. We use Teams to work with each other and show. And actually the professional development during our convocation back in August was to actually show each other exactly what we had developed and to give the results, not just to say this is what I've done, but to say how well it worked with the students. And so now we've got these teams working in teams, learning how to do things better with each other.
Fantastic. Well, we want to thank everybody for their time today. I know we're running short on time, so I'm going to push it back to our fearless leader, Craig Ncatc. One question that did pop up is, will a recording of the webinar be available? And it will be. So that will come out from Ncatc as a follow-up. And with that, Craig, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Tony, and the entire panel today for all of your expertise, passion, and giving us all the great tips and tricks that you've amassed over the last almost 7 months that we've been involved in the pandemic. And I think they'll serve the audience very well going forward. And anything that the audience would like to connect with us later, please funnel it through Ncatc, myself, or any of the folks that are on the webinar today. I really I want to make sure that I post the virtual exhibit hall one more time in the chat box, which has just now happened. But I want to thank Kim Johnson from South Central College, Sally K. Janes from San Jacinto, our keynote speaker extraordinaire, Mark Perna from TFS Results, especially our question box manager, Tony, and Alicia and Ali from Zeiss, being our sponsor and our help on moderating the questions. And more than anything, our host on the webinar, Cord, Trey and Hope Kotner down there in Waco, Texas, are doing a great job supporting our platform needs. And we want to thank you for that. There'll be a brief survey you'll get in your mailboxes, all of you who have attended today, and a link to the recording of this webinar in the next few days. So look for that. And we look forward to seeing you on future events that NCATC is doing. There's a lot of giveaways at the virtual exhibit hall. So please go right there after we hang up today. Thank you again for everybody's attention and your support, as well as your expertise. And keep safe, doing good things for workforce and education in the next months to come. We'll be in touch.
Thank
Bye
you.
for now.